Moving on, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is set to travel to France, Slovakia in June this, and India, Europe up the engagements. His itinerary includes attending the G7 summit in WION, visiting Nice and Paris in France, and a visit to Slovakia. The 52nd G7 summit is being hosted by France in the scenic town of WION from June 15 to 17. French President Emmanuel Macron has invited Prime Minister Modi as a key outreach partner. Indian Prime Minister Modi has been invited to the summit regularly since 2019, and interestingly, it was France which started this tradition. Discussions at the Outreach Summit are expected to focus on artificial intelligence governance, critical mineral supply chains, climate change, energy security and conflicts, including Ukraine and West Asia. US President Donald Trump is also attending the summit, though it is not known if any bilateral with the Indian side is planned or under consideration. No in-person meeting has happened between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump since February 2025, though both leaders have had a number of telephonic talks since then. Prime Minister Modi is also scheduled to make a visit to Slovakia, a move that builds on recent momentum in ties between the two countries. In February, Slovak President visited India for the India AI Impact Summit and held talks with the Indian Prime Minister. This is the first ever visit of an Indian Prime Minister to Slovakia since both countries established ties in 1993. Well, for more on this, WION's Assistant Editor for Foreign Affairs, Siddhant Sibal, is joining us live from New Delhi. Siddhant, what is the strategic significance of Prime Minister Modi visiting these two countries at this moment?
Well, the big focus, of course, is India's engagement with the European Union and Europe. We know that this month, the Indian Prime Minister was on a four-country visit to Europe, whether it's the northern part of Europe, including the Nordics, to, of course, the southern part, Italy. And then we saw the visit of the Cyprus president. And next month, it will be France for the G7 summit, where the Indian Prime Minister will be traveling to three cities, including Paris and Nice, and then, of course, Slovakia. Now, Slovakia is significant in many ways. Slovakia is seen as the Detroit of Europe. It is the country that produces the maximum number of cars per capita. It has an Indian link as well, an Indian company responsible and playing an important role in terms of car manufacturing. But essentially focus will be first, of course, at the G7 engagement with the G7 countries. India has been invited, as it has been regularly, for the G7 Outreach Summit. In fact, the first time the Indian Prime Minister was invited for the G7 Outreach Summit was in 2019 under the chairmanship of France. And then again, this time around, the Indian Prime Minister will be traveling at the invitation of the French President Emmanuel Macron. Of course, there is no confirmation on bilaterals. Mr. Rubio, the Secretary of State, who was here in Delhi, had suggested for a meeting between the two leaders. Of course, there's a lot of time for that to happen and materialize as well, because leaders' schedule can be quite packed. But clearly, France is an important partner of India, and this visit, of course, helps firm up the relationship.
As you rightly said, Siddhant, the G7 appearance for India is going to be significant, even if the country is not part of the grouping, and we'll have to see how it folds out from now on. Thank you for joining us for the broadcast.